When weathered lumberjack Marcus Blackwood offered $50 to a desperate father for his daughter's hand in 1847 Oregon, he believed he was merely providing shelter to a soul in need. But Emma harbored a precious secret within that would fulfill 17 years of his quiet prayers to the majestic forest spirits. Together, they might weather the brutal winter that threatened to destroy his newfound hopes. Marcus Blackwood's axe struck forcefully into the massive pine, scattering wooden fragments like startled birds around his glistening brow. The crack reverberated through the Oregon peaks like distant thunder, met only with silence. Just as it had every dawn for the past 3 years since establishing his homestead in these solitary woods. The year was 1847, and the Oregon Territory sprawled untamed and infinite before him. Most settlers arrived with families, visions of fertile fields, and children's laughter filling their hearts. Marcus came by himself. He remained solitary, and each nightfall he questioned if the Almighty had cast his name aside. Wisps of steam danced above his tin cup as he rested momentarily. The fellow loggers would soon arrive from camp, sharing tales of their wives' hearty meals and their little ones' milestones. Marcus would nod, smile, and mask how their stories pierced his soul like thorns. He'd mastered concealing his solitude behind cheerful banter and diligence, though the ancient pines knew better. They witnessed his solitary conversations, heard his yearning for companionship in this modest existence. The logging camp stirred with morning activity. As men readied their equipment, Marcus observed them discreetly while honing his tools. Large Bill Thompson grumbled about his wife's latest home improvements. Young Samuel boasted about teaching his boy woodcraft. Even the curmudgeonly old Eric beamed while reading his daughter's correspondence from the east. "Morning, Marcus," hollered James Miller, the camp's cook. "Will you join us this Sunday? Sarah's baking her renowned apple pie." Marcus mustered a smile. "Appreciate it, James, but there's work waiting." The same deflection, as always. Truth be told, sitting amidst James's joyful family gathering felt more painful than dining solo. At least in his cabin, solitude seemed like a choice. The labor was demanding, but rewarding. Each tree fell precisely as Marcus intended. His expertise gained through dedication and innate understanding commanded respect among his peers. Though they couldn't fathom his hermit-like existence, the other men admired his craftsmanship. William Patterson, who managed the camp, often remarked that Marcus understood trees better than most men understood each other. But trees couldn't engage in conversation. Trees couldn't share your humor or offer comfort during tempests. Trees couldn't fill the vacant seat at your supper table. As daylight intensified, Marcus found himself working with increased vigor, attempting to outpace thoughts that inevitably caught up. Perspiration clouded his vision, and his muscles ached, yet physical discomfort seemed more bearable than the persistent hollow in his chest. During their midday respite, he distanced himself from the crew, consuming his simple meal of bread and cured meat, while they exchanged tales and shared tobacco. Their mingled voices created a soothing backdrop that transported him to childhood memories of church gatherings, when he still believed divine intervention manifested in clear, unmistakable ways. "Say, Marcus," Pete approached, clutching his lunch. "Word is there's a new household in town. 3 daughters, each lovely as springtime blossoms. Perhaps you might—" "Content as I am," Marcus interjected gently. Pete's intentions were kind. They all meant well, but Marcus had attempted courtship previously back in Pennsylvania. The ladies would observe his calloused hands and reserved nature, then gravitate toward more eloquent suitors, promising gentler lifestyles. The afternoon progressed methodically. Strike rest, strike rest. Each swing of his axe synchronized with his heartbeat, powerful and steady, yet solitary. Other lumberjacks worked collaboratively, conversing as they toiled. Marcus preferred solitude with his thoughts, even when they wandered down darker paths. As dusk cast lengthy shadows through the forest, Marcus collected his implements and journeyed homeward. His dwelling occupied a clearing he'd wrestled from the wilderness, modest but well-crafted, featuring glass panes that captured day's final rays. Smoke spiraled from the chimney where he'd preserved the morning's embers, and briefly he could imagine someone awaiting his return. But reality crashed in as he crossed the threshold. A solitary plate adorned the table. One chair faced the hearth. One pillow rested on the bed he'd constructed, spaciously enough for two, preserving possibility should fortune smile upon him. He ignited the oil lamp and prepared his modest evening meal, beans, bacon, and bread. Though well-prepared dining alone rendered everything tasteless. He'd attempted reading during meals, but books only emphasized how even fictional personalities enjoyed more companionship than himself. Post-supper, Marcus settled by the fire, retrieving his carving knife. Whittling soothed his restless mind, and he'd developed considerable skill, crafting miniature animals and ornate boxes. This evening he shaped a diminutive cradle, no larger than his hand. He rationalized it as mere practice, though his heart recognized the truth. Outside, strengthening winds rattled the window panes and whistled through pine branches like a melancholic melody. Marcus added fuel to the flames and observed their dance. Occasionally he conversed with the fire, sharing his daily experiences, aspirations, and worries. Fire proved an attentive listener, offering crackling responses without judging his foolishness. Before bed, Marcus knelt beside the simple wooden cross mounted on his cabin wall. His prayers had grown briefer through the years, eroded by a silence that seemed too dense to breach. "Lord," he murmured, "I seek only a modest blessing. Someone to share this existence with, someone who might find my reserved nature peaceful, rather than peculiar. There's space in my heart and home for a family, should you choose to guide one my direction." The cross remained silent. The cabin settled around him with its familiar symphony of creaks and groans. In the darkness beyond his walls, an owl called into the night, and somewhere distant, its companion responded. Marcus extinguished the lamp and eased into bed, drawing up the quilts his mother had lovingly stitched. Tomorrow would bring more forests, more labor, more evenings mirroring this one. Yet perhaps, just perhaps tomorrow might usher in something unexpected. He closed his eyes and listened to the wind, imagining it carried his prayers heavenward through the towering evergreens. Fresh bread. Get your fresh bread here. The cry resonated through Portland's Saturday market like a chapel bell, and Marcus nearly dropped his sack of nails. He'd ventured into town for necessities, coffee flour, the monthly provisions that sustained his solitary mountain existence. But something about the bustling marketplace felt different today, charged with an energy that made his skin tingle with unfamiliar anticipation. Wagons groaned along muddy thoroughfares, while horses stamped and snorted in the brisk autumn breeze. Children wove between adults' legs, pursuing escaped chickens. Women in worn dresses bargained over produce, while men discussed timber prices and weather forecasts. Marcus typically rushed through these excursions uneasy among so many people, after weeks of isolation. Today, he found himself moving unhurriedly, studying faces, absorbing conversations that weren't his concern. "Sarah, come here this instant." The harsh command drew Marcus's attention toward a weathered wagon near the feed merchant. A gaunt man, with unruly gray hair, seized a young woman's arm, yanking her closer. Even from 10 yards away, Marcus noticed the bruises marking her wrist, the way she held herself rigid against unseen hurts. The girl, no young woman, perhaps 17 or 18, remained motionless, while her father arranged their wagon's contents. Her dress had once matched summer skies, but now appeared faded and mended. Her brown hair fell in a simple plait down her back, and despite the surrounding tumult, she moved with a quiet grace that reminded Marcus of deer he occasionally glimpsed in forest meadows. "Pardon me, sir," spoke a voice behind him. Marcus turned to find a young boy, no more than 10, pulling at his coat sleeve. "You dropped this." Marcus glanced down at the paper sack in the child's outstretched hand. His coffee beans lay scattered across the muddy earth. He must have been lost in thought, watching the wagon longer than he'd realized. "Thank you, lad." Marcus retrieved a penny from his pocket and offered it to the boy, who beamed before darting off toward a candy seller. When Marcus redirected his attention to the wagon, the thin man was addressing a gathering of curious onlookers. His words carried clearly through the market square, and what Marcus heard made his blood run cold. "She's a capable worker, as strong as any man, and well-versed in household duties," William McKenna proclaimed, maintaining his grip on his daughter's elbow. 17 years old, in good health, and ready to wed any man wise enough to recognize a good deal. The crowd shifted uneasily, murmuring amongst themselves. Several women turned away in disgust, while a handful of men drew closer, appraising Sarah as they might inspect livestock before a purchase. Marcus watched her complexion drain, but she maintained her dignified posture, refusing to display fear, even as her father continued his dreadful proposition. "Opening bid stands at $40, McKenna declared, "though I'll accept 50 from a suitable man, someone who can properly care for damaged goods." Damaged goods. The phrase struck Marcus like a physical assault. He observed Sarah's composure falter momentarily before she reconstructed her shield of dignity, and something within his heart ignited. Marcus had witnessed enough brutality in his 34 years to recognize desperation incarnate. McKenna's attire hung loosely on his frame, his hands trembling slightly, telltale signs of a man who'd squandered everything to gambling or alcohol or both, but selling his own flesh and blood. That transgressed boundaries Marcus hadn't known existed. "I require payment today," McKenna persisted, his tone growing increasingly desperate as potential buyers dispersed. "Winter approaches, and I've obligations that can't wait until spring." Sarah finally broke her silence, her voice barely perceptible above the market's din. "Father, please, surely there's another solution." McKenna's expression contorted with something sinister, shame, intermingled with rage and obstinate pride. "Don't start with me, girl. This predicament is as much your doing as mine. Had you been more cautious, more modest, perhaps we wouldn't face this situation." Marcus couldn't decipher McKenna's meaning, but he witnessed how the words struck Sarah like physical blows. Her face blanched, then flushed before settling into the pallid resignation of someone who'd ceased fighting unwinnable battles. The crowd began to thin as the novelty of the spectacle waned. Several men remained exchanging hushed words and casting predatory glances at Sarah that made Marcus's fingers instinctively clench. He recognized their kind opportunists who preyed on vulnerability, mistaking it for weakness. $45, a gruff voice called from the back of the lingering group. Marcus turned to see Thomas Blackwood, a ranch hand notorious for his cruelty to both animals and workers. "Seems fair price for a woman with a tarnished name." McKenna's eyes flickered with desperate anticipation. "50 would close the deal, Mr. Blackwood. She's more than worth the sum." Marcus observed Sarah's expression as her father bartered her future with a man who appraised her like cattle at auction. Her emerald eyes met his across the dwindling crowd, and what he saw there pierced his heart not merely fear or despair, but a profound solitude that echoed his own. Acting on instinct, Marcus stepped forward. $60. All eyes shifted to him. McKenna's face registered shock. Blackwood scowled, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. Sarah gazed at Marcus with astonishment and what appeared to be a glimmer of hope. $60. McKenna echoed incredulity, mixing with greed. "That's quite the offer, stranger. You carrying that kind of money." Marcus withdrew his worn leather wallet, counting the bills, methodically. The sum represented months of careful saving, earmarked for cabin improvements, and perhaps a stronger horse. Yet gazing at Sarah, noting her unwavering dignity despite her circumstances, Marcus recognized something far more valuable than material comforts. $60, he stated resolutely, but not as purchase price. For marriage with the lady's consent. This isn't a transaction for ownership. The crowd stirred excitedly. This development exceeded their expectations for market day entertainment. McKenna's expression wavered between confusion and avarice, while Sarah's face transformed from disbelief to an emotion Marcus couldn't quite interpret. "Well, daughter," McKenna pressed, "this gentleman offers marriage and compensates me for your upbringing. What say you?" Marcus moved closer, disregarding McKenna and addressing Sarah directly. "I'm Marcus Whitmore. I have a cabin near the logging camps. It's modest but honest living with a respectable home. I'm not here to buy you. I'm asking if you'd consider building a life together." Sarah held his gaze, steadily searching his eyes for something Marcus prayed she would discover. When she answered, her voice carried a quiet strength. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore, I accept your proposal." The words bridged the space between them like an unexpected path joining two solitary hearts amid the bustling marketplace where destiny wore the mask of desperate choices. The aroma of baking bread permeated Marcus Blackwood's cabin, a scent absent for 2 decades. Sarah worked at his weathered table, her fingers dusted with flour. She seemed transformed from the woman he'd encountered in the marketplace just days ago. The terror that had haunted her gaze was gradually dissolving, replaced by something Marcus Blackwood struggled to identify. "You needn't trouble yourself with such tasks," Marcus Blackwood said, hanging his worn coat on the wooden hook beside the entrance. His mud-caked boots left tracks across the floorboards, but Sarah appeared unbothered. "I want to contribute," she responded, her attention fixed on the dough beneath her hands. "It's only fair." Marcus Blackwood observed her technique. Her hands moved with practiced confidence, suggesting years of experience at the craft. He pondered what other talents her father had failed to mention. The man had described Sarah as if she were livestock at auction, offering only the most fundamental details. The hearth fire snapped and popped, casting fluid shadows across the cabin's interior. Beyond the walls, the wind gathered force, causing the surrounding pines to bend and whisper. Marcus Blackwood sensed winter's early approach in his aging joints. "Sarah," he began cautiously, "we should discuss what lies ahead." Her hands stilled their motion. She remained motionless, eyes fixed on the bread dough. Marcus Blackwood noticed her diminutive presence in his cabin, reminiscent of a cautious sparrow seeking shelter from the storm. "What do you mean?" she inquired. "About this situation." Marcus Blackwood settled into a chair across the table. "I know your father arranged this without considering your wishes. If you desire to leave, I'll provide assistance. I have savings set aside." Sarah finally raised her eyes to meet his. Unshed tears made her green eyes glisten. "Where would I go? I have no one except—" Her voice trailed off as she averted her gaze. "Except what?" The silence stretched so long that Marcus Blackwood wondered if she'd respond. Between them, the forgotten dough continued its slow rise in the cabin's warmth. "There's something you should know," Sarah whispered, "but I fear your reaction might drive me away." Marcus Blackwood leaned closer. "I won't send you away. We'll find a way forward together." Sarah's trembling hands brushed the flour from her fingers with a damp cloth. She drifted toward the window, her gaze fixed on the forest as dusk settled in. Marcus Blackwood observed her reflection in the glass, ethereal and hesitant. "My father spoke truthfully about my strength," she began softly. "Since I turned 12, I've managed our farmstead single-handedly. I can prepare meals, maintain the house, repair clothing, and care for livestock. I'm skilled in crafting remedies from forest plants. My reading and writing abilities surpass those of most men in our village." "These are admirable qualities," Marcus Blackwood responded with kindness. "What about them would make me turn you away?" "There's more to tell." Sarah turned from the window. "Something he concealed. A truth that made him desperate to be rid of me." Marcus Blackwood remained silent. Experience had taught him that pressuring Sarah only caused her to withdraw further into herself. "I'm with child," she confessed hurriedly, as if swift delivery might lessen the impact. The revelation struck Marcus Blackwood like a thunderbolt. He sank back in his chair, processing her words. A child. Sarah was expecting a child. When? He inquired. Perhaps 3 or 4 months along, I can't be certain. Sarah's words were barely a whisper. That's why Father was so intent on finding someone to marry me. He claimed no man would accept a woman carrying another's child. Marcus Blackwood rose and approached the hearth. He gazed into the dancing flames, attempting to organize his thoughts. Sarah's pregnancy. Did this change everything? Or perhaps not. He recalled countless solitary nights in this cabin, beseeching the Lord for a family. He'd dreamed of a loving wife, of children who would call him Papa. Never had he imagined it happening this way. Was it someone you cared for? Marcus Blackwood asked, still facing the flames. No. The response emerged harsh and cold. It wasn't my choice. Marcus Blackwood comprehended immediately. Beyond her father's betrayal, Sarah had endured violation only to face blame for it. Rage bubbled within him like water at full boil. He turned to face her. She stood beside the table arms, wrapped protectively around herself, anticipating rejection. Her youthful vulnerability stirred profound compassion in his heart. "Do you wish to keep this child?" he asked. Sarah's expression registered shock. "What? The baby? Do you want to raise it?" She paused, contemplating the question. "I was frightened initially, but yes, I believe I do," Sarah replied softly. "The child shouldn't suffer for the circumstances of its creation." Marcus Blackwood acknowledged with a gentle nod. "Then we shall find our way through this together. Did you think I would send you away?" "Sarah, this cabin has been my solitary home for 15 years. Each night I've petitioned the Lord to bless me with a family, though this may not align with my original vision." He paused thoughtfully, surveying the cabin that suddenly felt more alive. Perhaps the Lord's methods aren't always what we expect them to be. Sarah's composure crumbled then, not with the quiet tears she'd been restraining, but with deep, body-racking sobs. Marcus Blackwood approached her, enveloping her in his arms with delicate care, as though she were crafted from the finest porcelain. "Everything will be fine," he assured her. "We'll navigate this path together." But what of others' opinions, their judgments? Let them think as they please. This is our story, to write, not theirs. Sarah drew back, meeting his gaze. "Do you truly mean that, with all my heart?" Marcus Blackwood was surprised by the unwavering conviction in his voice. "This child will need a father figure. While I may not share its blood, I can fulfill every other paternal role that matters." Sarah's face brightened with her first genuine smile since their meeting, though it was tentative and uncertain. "What should we do next?" she inquired softly. Marcus Blackwood surveyed the cabin with fresh perspective. Changes would be necessary. A cradle-infant clothing provisions for the winter months. They would need to prepare for bringing new life into the world, far from medical assistance. "Now we prepare," he stated firmly. "Winter approaches, and nature follows its own schedule." Outside, wind whistled through the evergreens, but within the cabin's walls, a transformation had occurred. The emptiness that had pervaded Marcus Blackwood's home for countless years finally dissipated, replaced by 2 souls planning an unexpected shared destiny. The first snowflake landed on Marcus Blackwood's nose as he chopped wood behind the cabin. Glancing at the leaden October sky, he muttered a quiet curse. Winter was arriving 6 weeks ahead of schedule, and their preparations remained incomplete. Inside, Sarah was mastering Marcus Blackwood's mother's sewing machine. The rhythmic sound of stitching had become their daily accompaniment as she crafted tiny garments suitable for an infant. Her pregnancy was now unmistakable, her rounded belly visible even beneath her loosest attire. "Marcus Blackwood," Sarah's voice called urgently from within. "Come quickly." He abandoned his axe and rushed toward the cabin, his heart thundering in his chest. Sarah had been experiencing intermittent discomfort throughout the previous week. The closest physician was a 3-day journey away during favorable weather conditions. In this snow, reaching him would be as impossible as touching the stars. Yet when he rushed inside, Sarah's face bore a radiant expression. She was positioned near the window, one palm resting on her abdomen. "Come, feel this," she beckoned, reaching for his hand. Marcus Blackwood allowed her to guide his palm to the curve of her stomach. Initially, there was no sensation. Then abruptly, he felt a gentle pressure against his hand, reminiscent of someone tapping from within. "The baby's stirring," Sarah whispered. Her expression illuminated with pure wonderment. Marcus Blackwood gazed at his hand upon her belly, spellbound. Throughout all his dreams of domestic life, he had never envisioned this particular moment, experiencing a child's movements before its birth. It brought a newfound reality to their situation. "Is it uncomfortable?" he inquired. "Not at all. It's extraordinary, like sharing a private dialogue that only I can perceive." They remained motionless, anticipating another movement. When it occurred again, Marcus Blackwood released a spontaneous laugh, an expression of joy he hadn't experienced in years. Their tender moment was cut short by the sound of approaching hooves. Through the window, Marcus Blackwood observed 3 mounted figures nearing the cabin. He identified them as Tom Bradley, Pete Morrison, and Jake Williams from the logging operation. Their expressions were grave and unwelcoming. "Remain inside," Marcus Blackwood instructed Sarah. He emerged onto the porch, securing the door behind him. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," he greeted. "Well, what brings you here?" Tom Bradley, the eldest among them, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We need to discuss something, Marcus Blackwood. The men are expressing concerns." "What sort of concerns?" "About your current arrangement." Bradley gestured toward the cabin. "Rumors are circulating about your wife's situation." Marcus Blackwood felt tension creep into his jaw. "How is that anyone's business but our own?" "Listen, Marcus Blackwood, you're a valued worker. Everyone respects you. But the townswomen are gossiping. They're suggesting it's improper. You marrying someone who was expecting before the wedding." Pete Morrison interjected. "Mrs. Henderson from the general store claims respectable people shouldn't associate with those who disregard proper Christian values." "And what exactly are you proposing?" Marcus Blackwood questioned, his tone dangerously low. "Perhaps it would be best if you sought residence elsewhere," Jake Williams suggested. "At least until the baby arrives and everything settles into place." Marcus Blackwood studied each man's face carefully. These were men he'd worked beside for countless seasons. He'd risked his own life to save Pete Morrison when a massive pine had fallen unexpectedly 2 summers past. He'd opened his wallet to Tom Bradley when his wife had fallen ill. Now, here they stood on his porch, telling him to pack up and leave, all because of town gossip. "No," Marcus Blackwood stated firmly. "No." Bradley's eyebrows shot up. "You heard me. I'm staying right here. This is my property, my home, my wife. If anyone in town has issues with that, they can come speak to me face to face." Marcus Blackwood tried to see reason. Morrison pleaded. "I apologize for interrupting the story at this moment, but if you're finding this tale engaging, please consider hitting that subscribe button to access more stories like this one. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comment section below. Now let's return to our story." "I am being reasonable," Morrison insisted. "What's unreasonable is watching grown men ride all the way out here to dictate my life choices based on nothing but idle gossip from folks who know nothing about my circumstances." The 3 men shared uncomfortable glances. Clearly, they hadn't anticipated such defiance. "The logging company might let you go if the talk continues," Williams warned. "Then I'll seek work elsewhere. There isn't other work, Marcus Blackwood, not in these parts, not during winter." Marcus Blackwood felt the gravity of their words sink in. Without his position at the logging camp, he'd have no means to provide for Sarah and their unborn child. With winter approaching, they desperately needed funds for essentials: food, medicine, basic supplies. But standing there on his porch, facing these men he'd long called friends, Marcus Blackwood had an epiphany. Their friendship came with strings attached. Their acceptance wasn't unconditional. The price they demanded was the abandonment of the woman who had filled his world with more happiness in 3 months than he'd known in 2 decades. "I thank you for making the ride out here to warn me," Marcus Blackwood said quietly. "But my answer remains unchanged. I won't send my wife away, or will I abandon my home." Through the window pane, he caught sight of Sarah, partially hidden behind the curtain. Fear was evident in her expression, and rage bubbled up inside him. These men were causing unnecessary distress to his pregnant wife with their petty rumors. "Consider what you're doing, Marcus Blackwood," Bradley urged. "Winter's coming. That woman will need proper medical attention when her time comes. You can't handle that alone out here. I'll find a way." What if tragedy strikes? What if she doesn't survive? What if the infant doesn't make it? Will your stubbornness be worth such a cost? The words struck Marcus Blackwood with the force of physical blows. He'd been desperately avoiding these dark thoughts. But Bradley's concerns weren't unfounded. Sarah was petite, and this was her first pregnancy. Complications could arise. They often did, especially in such remote conditions. Yet as his gaze fell upon Sarah's face in the window, Marcus Blackwood made his decision. "We'll face whatever comes," he declared. The 3 men exchanged knowing glances. Bradley sighed heavily. "On your head be it, Marcus Blackwood. Remember, we tried to help." They turned their mounts and departed, leaving Marcus Blackwood standing alone on his porch as the first genuine snowfall commenced. Heavy damp flakes that would soon transform the mountain trails into dangerous sheets of ice. Sarah emerged from the house. What did they want? Nothing to worry about. Marcus Blackwood assured her, drawing her close. But as they watched the snowfall intensify, they both understood that winter would challenge them beyond anything they'd experienced before. Spring seemed impossibly distant when the baby was due. Months of bitter cold, complete isolation, and the haunting knowledge that when Sarah's time came, they might face it entirely alone. That evening, lying in bed while the wind raged around their cabin, Sarah broke the silence. "Perhaps they have a point. Maybe I should return to town." "Absolutely not," Marcus Blackwood responded resolutely. "We remain together. Whatever challenges arise, we face them as one." Yet privately in the darkness of his cabin, with winter's grip tightening around them, Marcus Blackwood questioned whether he'd made a catastrophic error. William McKenna's horse burst into the yard like a bolt of lightning striking against the towering oak. Marcus Blackwood abandoned his axe at the sound of the furious hoofbeats, recognizing trouble had found them once more. Through the kitchen window, he observed Sarah's complexion drained to match the snow's pallor. Her trembling hands clutched the table, her swollen belly hampering quick movement. "Whitmore!" McKenna's voice thundered across the clearing like an enraged grizzly. "Show yourself. We've got unfinished business." Marcus Blackwood approached the mounted man deliberately, his footsteps crushing the spring mud. Behind him, Sarah's sharp intake of breath carried through the open window. The unborn child must be moving vigorously. That sound always accompanied the little one's restless moments. "Doctor." Hartwell had cautioned them about babies sensing maternal distress, and currently Sarah's fear was palpable enough for both mother and child. McKenna appeared haggard, his attire tattered, and soiled, his facial hair unkempt and matted. The dark hollows beneath his eyes revealed to Marcus Blackwood a man who'd endured countless sleepless nights. But what truly alarmed him were McKenna's hands. They trembled violently like autumn leaves in a gale, and Marcus Blackwood instantly recognized the telltale sign of McKenna's return to the bottle. "What brings you here?" Marcus Blackwood inquired, maintaining a composed demeanor. His years of experience with treacherous timber had taught him that panic could prove deadlier than any descending limb. "Bring me." McKenna's laughter rang hollow and bitter. "I'm here for what's rightfully mine. That woman I sold you has been nothing but trouble. Look at her now, swollen with another man's child. You've been swindled, Whitmore, and I reckon you're due some compensation." Marcus Blackwood felt rage surge through his chest, burning like an untamed inferno. "Sarah is my lawful wife now. The past holds no significance." "No significance," McKenna spat viciously onto the ground. "That child she carries could be anyone's. Perhaps the smithy's apprentice who constantly lurked about. Maybe that merchant who passed through when summer waned. Could even be my own, for all you know." The accusation struck Marcus Blackwood like a physical blow. He heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath from within the cabin, knowing she caught every cruel syllable. This precisely matched her deepest fears, that her former life would eventually wound those she'd come to cherish. "You're speaking falsehoods," Marcus Blackwood declared, though his voice emerged weaker than intended. McKenna's smile resembled a predator cornering its prey. "Am I? Why not ask her yourself? Go ahead. Question your beloved wife about the true father. Watch if she can maintain eye contact while speaking truth." Within the cabin, Sarah's weeping reached Marcus Blackwood's ears, gentle, muffled sobs that shattered his heart into countless fragments. He'd witnessed her tears before, when discussing her pregnancy during frigid winter evenings while fretting about her maternal abilities. But this differed entirely. This was the sound of complete devastation. A crowd began forming along the clearing's perimeter. Marcus Blackwood spotted Tom Brennan and several fellow lumbermen. They'd evidently trailed McKenna, attracted by the commotion, like scavengers to carrion. Their expressions revealed their entertainment, eager for scandalous tales to circulate throughout the settlement. "Even assuming your claims hold truth," Marcus Blackwood stated deliberately, "nothing changes. Sarah remains my wife. The child she carries will still be mine. Yours." McKenna's laughter erupted again, so forcefully he nearly toppled from his mount. "You naive fool. That infant will emerge bearing no resemblance to you, and the entire settlement will realize you've been thoroughly deceived." Tom Brennan advanced with a malicious grin. "Perhaps McKenna speaks truth. Maybe it's wise to withdraw before you're further entangled." Marcus Blackwood surveyed the ring of men surrounding him, watching his predicament like a theatrical performance. These were the same men he'd labored alongside for years, shared countless meals with, and supported during their own hardships. Now they stood eagerly anticipating his downfall, ready to broadcast his humiliation across the entire territory. "Leave my property," Marcus Blackwood commanded softly. McKenna leaned forward astride his horse. "What was that?" "I said leave my property, every last one of you." Marcus Blackwood's voice strengthened with each syllable. "Sarah is my wife, because I made that choice. The child is mine, because I will nurture it. And should any of you take issue with that, you're welcome to face my axe." The warning lingered in the atmosphere like wisps from a dying fire. Though Marcus Blackwood had never been one for confrontation, 17 years of wielding an axe had developed muscles capable of shattering bones if necessity demanded. The loggers shifted uncomfortably, exchanging uncertain glances, their earlier enthusiasm for conflict notably diminished. Yet McKenna remained undeterred. Dismounting his horse, he approached Marcus Blackwood directly close enough that the stench of spirits permeated the air between them. $50 additional, McKenna proposed. "That's my price for keeping the town ignorant about the true nature of your bride. $50 buys my silence regarding her previous endeavors before your arrival." Marcus Blackwood gazed into McKenna's inflamed eyes and recognized something that churned his insides. This transcended mere financial gain. Here stood a man so devastated by his own decisions that he sought to destroy others' happiness. McKenna had forfeited everything, his homestead, his standing, his daughter's admiration, and now intended to drag Marcus Blackwood into his pit of despair. "No," Marcus Blackwood stated firmly. McKenna's complexion matched the crimson sunset. "No. You believe you can simply refuse me. That's precisely what I believe." Marcus Blackwood advanced, and this time McKenna retreated. "You bartered your daughter to settle gambling debts. You accepted my payment and departed without a backward glance. Now you demand more because you lack the fortitude to face your actions. You have no right to address me thus." McKenna's hand crept toward the blade at his waist. Marcus Blackwood intercepted McKenna's wrist before the blade could emerge from its sheath. Decades of wielding heavy axes had rendered his grip as unyielding as a steel vise. Terror and astonishment flickered across McKenna's features. "Heed my words carefully," Marcus Blackwood whispered, his tone carrying lethal stillness. "You will mount that horse and depart immediately. Should you ever trespass on my property again, I guarantee there won't be another opportunity for retreat. Is my meaning clear?" McKenna struggled against Marcus Blackwood's grasp, but found himself powerless against the woodsman's iron hold. The onlookers stood motionless, suddenly comprehending that their anticipated entertainment had transformed into something far more serious. Eventually, McKenna conceded with a nod. Marcus Blackwood released his grip, causing McKenna to stumble backward, massaging the crimson imprints left by Marcus Blackwood's fierce grasp. "This matter remains unresolved," McKenna grumbled as he clambered onto his mount. "It concluded the moment you arrived," Marcus Blackwood countered. He observed McKenna's retreat, followed by the dispersing loggers who'd hoped for more dramatic proceedings. Once they vanished from sight, Marcus Blackwood turned toward his dwelling. Sarah stood framed in the doorway, tears coursing down her cheeks, one palm resting protectively over their growing child. "Forgive me," she murmured. "I'm so sorry you had to endure those cruel words." Marcus Blackwood enveloped her in his embrace, feeling their child's movement against him. "Never apologize for his venomous tongue. None of his words hold meaning for me." Yet even as he spoke these reassurances, Marcus Blackwood questioned their authenticity. McKenna's allegations had sown doubts that might take root regardless of Marcus Blackwood's wishes. Sarah's piercing cry shattered the pre-dawn silence like an axe splitting fresh timber. Marcus Blackwood jolted awake instantly, alert, his heart thundering within his chest like a caged creature. Beside him, Sarah curled inward, clutching her abdomen. "It's happening," she exclaimed between spasms of pain. "The baby's coming now." Despite months of preparation for this precise moment, Marcus Blackwood's mind emptied like a freshly scraped parchment. He scrambled from the bed, nearly toppling over his own footwear in the darkness. His trembling hands fumbled with the oil lamp, casting flickering shadows across the cabin's interior. "I must fetch Dr. Hartwell," he declared, reaching for his coat. "There's no time." Sarah's voice emerged sharp and labored. "I can feel the child descending. Everything's progressing too rapidly." Beyond their walls, morning birds began their chorus, but within the cabin, time flowed like molasses in winter. Marcus Blackwood guided Sarah to the bed they'd prepared, layered with fresh linens and towels. Though he'd pored over Dr. Hartwell's medical texts to prepare for an unassisted delivery, the theoretical knowledge paled in comparison to watching his beloved endure each crushing wave of labor. Sarah's complexion had turned ashen as morning fog, yet her eyes blazed with unwavering resolve. In the brief respites between contractions, she clasped Marcus Blackwood's hand with remarkable strength. "Describe the cradle again," she whispered, seeking distraction from the mounting pain that gathered like an approaching thunderstorm. Marcus Blackwood returned her grip and began speaking, maintaining a steady voice despite his internal turmoil. "I selected the finest pine board I could find. I smoothed it until even a delicate butterfly's wings wouldn't snag, and I decorated the edges with carved blossoms matching those in your garden." Another contraction seized her, and Sarah's body tensed against the mattress. Marcus Blackwood watched helplessly, yearning to shoulder even a fraction of her suffering. Despite his physical prowess and years of demanding labor, he could offer nothing more than his presence and words of encouragement. Sunlight crept higher, washing the cabin walls in golden rose hues. Marcus Blackwood lost all sense of time, concentrating solely on Sarah's rhythmic breathing and repeating the reassuring phrases Dr. Hartwell had taught him. "You're doing magnificently. The end is near. Just hold on." Then, without warning, everything shifted. Sarah's expression transformed to one of alarm and uncertainty. "Something's amiss," she gasped. "I can't continue. This feels wrong." Marcus Blackwood's blood ran cold as ice melt. This was precisely what Dr. Hartwell had cautioned them about. Sarah's petite frame, the baby's positioning, all the potential complications that could arise when medical help was unavailable. "What can I do?" Marcus Blackwood asked, striving to mask his growing fear. Sarah's grip intensified further. "Help me upright. I think the baby's trapped." Marcus Blackwood supported her as she struggled to shift positions. Perspiration dotted her brow, despite the cool morning breeze. He noticed her increasing exhaustion, each contraction depleting more of her remaining strength. "I can see the crown," Marcus Blackwood announced suddenly. Indeed he could. A small patch of dark hair had become visible. "Sarah, I can see our child." The word "our" slipped out naturally, and Marcus Blackwood meant it with every ounce of his being. Whatever accusations McKenna had hurled, whatever uncertainties had plagued his mind throughout the endless night, they dissolved instantly upon glimpsing that tiny head emerging into the world. "Push," he encouraged. "One final push." Sarah summoned her last reserves of strength, her complexion deepening to crimson with exertion. Marcus Blackwood watched transfixed as the miracle unfolded before him. First emerged the crown, then delicate shoulders, and finally accompanied by a rush of fluids that made his vision swim. The entire infant slipped into his waiting hands. Time seemed to freeze in that instant. The tiny being lay motionless and bluish in Marcus Blackwood's palms, so diminutive and flawless, it resembled a masterfully carved soap figurine. Marcus Blackwood's heart ceased beating as he anxiously awaited any indication of life. Then the infant's lips parted, and the most exquisite sound Marcus Blackwood had ever experienced filled their humble cabin. A high-pitched, indignant cry that proclaimed to the universe that this small soul was vibrantly alive and distinctly displeased about being wet and cold. "What is it?" Sarah breathed, straining to peek over her rounded belly. "A daughter," Marcus Blackwood replied, his voice quavering with unexpected tears that had begun flowing without his notice. "She's absolute perfection, Sarah utterly flawless." He swaddled the newborn in the soft blanket Sarah had lovingly crafted from pieces of her cherished old dresses. The infant's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises as blue as a cloudless summer day, and seemed to gaze directly at him with an expression of solemn contemplation. As Marcus Blackwood carefully placed their precious bundle in Sarah's embrace, he searched the tiny features for any trace of the men McKenna had mentioned. Yet all he could discern was Sarah's determined chin and his own azure eyes gazing back with wonder rather than trepidation. "Welcome, precious one," Sarah murmured, gently caressing the baby's cheek. "I'm your mama, and this is your papa. We've been anticipating your arrival for so long." The infant responded with gentle cooing sounds, reminiscent of a kitten seeking its mother. When Sarah adjusted her dress to nurse Marcus, Blackwood felt an unprecedented peace settle in his heart, a contentment he'd never known in his 34 years of life. "What shall we call her?" Sarah asked, observing their daughter's tiny fist waving gracefully. Marcus Blackwood reflected on their challenging winter, the uncertainties they'd weathered, the terrifying moment when he'd feared losing them both. "Grace," he declared softly. "Her name is Grace." Sarah's face brightened with a genuine smile, her first since McKenna's unsettling visit. Grace Whitmore, it's perfect." As morning light streamed through their cabin windows, Marcus Blackwood embraced his family, marveling at how swiftly life could transform. Yesterday he'd been a man battling doubts and allegations. Today he was a father, witnessing his miracle explore the world through each tiny movement. Beyond their walls, the Oregon pines swayed gently, their rustling seeming to whisper welcome songs to the newest member of their woodland family.